Hi, Richard.
How are you, Hugh?
Very good, thank you.
Thanks for taking a few minutes of your day to chat about the movie with me.
My pleasure.
Let's start, for people who haven't seen the movie, just with a definition of what Hysteria is. I did some reading on this after I saw the movie because, frankly, I couldn't believe that people thought that this sort of catch-all of a diagnosis could actually be true. But how does the movie define it?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Well, just the definition of hysteria. I did a lot of reading about this after seeing the movie, and frankly was surprised that there was a time in our history that this sort of broad catch-all could possibly be taken seriously.
But
diagnosis.
But astonishingly, it was. I mean, that was that basic fact, which is the. I think the source of all the comedy and certainly the funniest thing in the movie is also the one thing that was completely accurate.
Yes, and I like the definition that I found. It said women who are feeling moody, women who are feeling sad, women who don't listen to their husbands. It's really shocking, and this was something that was practiced and diagnosed fairly commonly up till about 1952.
Right. I mean, kind of, pre-Freud and post-Freud.
Yes.
It is kind of remarkable, but nonetheless scientifically accurate. I mean, rather historically accurate, scientifically very inaccurate.
Well, doctors were sort of horrified by the suggestion at the time, and certainly in 1880, when the movie is set, that they were doing anything sexual. This was completely seen as medicinal.
Yeah, that's exactly right. They thought they were shifting the uterus.
Right. No, which is interesting. Tell me a little bit about when this script landed on your desk. How was it pitched to you?
Well, all I got was essentially the tagline. The invention of the vibrator. I had some awareness of the premise that we're talking about. So it wasn't a complete revelation to me, right. But what I really did like was the tone, the tone that the movie struck, kind of between broad comedy and something much kind of sweeter, if you like. So yeah, that was it. I was a little intrigued by that. I went to meet Tanya Wexler, the director, and that was that.
And the movie has a lot of different elements. There's a lot of moving parts here. There's a romantic comedy element to it. Yeah. There is the historical aspect of it. There's also an undercurrent of women's rights being explored here. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting to find a balancing act, I guess, between all of these elements. Which of those drew you in? I suppose it was the Witch's Brew,
right, that drew me in. I mean, any one of them on their own, I think, would make for a far less interesting movie. I mean, obviously, there's plenty of interesting movies to be made around the subject of women's rights. But but in terms of the bits of this movie that address that had been extrapolated into a whole movie, I don't think it would have added up to much. And equally, the comedy on its own, I think we grow tired of. It's a combination. It's the context that allows you to believe, that we really are in Victorian England, that then makes the comedy work so well, because the reality of what they're doing is so astonishing.
Well, it's a comedy of manners to a degree as well. I mean, tell me a little bit about shooting the scenes where you are manually treating your patients.
Well, we had some very accomplished and very game actresses come in and hoist themselves up onto our operating table, and then we just we shot what you see in the movie.
Well, what was your sort of mindset as you were doing? I mean, obviously, the doctors felt that there was nothing sexual about this at all, but quite clearly.
Well, we know what's going on. Yeah,
we know what's going on. And now, do you feel like in your heart of hearts that your character had? Because I got the feeling that he took this job because, well, I mean, in the movie we see he's down to brass tacks. He's down to the end of, his employment opportunities. And I sort of had the idea that, in the beginning anyway, he saw this for what it was, but then later on, as the practice grew and his fortunes seemed to be growing along with it, that he just sort of molded his thoughts about it to fit in line with Dalrymple's.
Well, no, I don't think. I think that he initially thinks that he's never heard of it, and he's only heard, insofar as he's heard anything about it, maybe it's kind of just quackery.
Right.
But I think he takes what he's told by Dalrymple at face value. The fact that he's forward thinking enough, or not even forward thinking, but intellectually, perhaps ahead of his peers enough to know about germ theory, doesn't necessarily going to mean that he knows the first thing about female sexuality. He hears the statistics, the number of women that are being treated, the way they're also so in need, and he thinks this is great. It's exactly what he wants, because it's a chance not only to earn some money and make and have a future, but to help people. So that's the way he sees it to begin with, and that's not rationalization. I think that's sincere.
Right.
And then as it goes on, I think then there's maybe a little bit of rationalization creeps in.
Right. And there are some wonderfully comic performances here. I really enjoyed watching Rupert Everett work through this. Tell me a little bit about working with him and Jonathan Pryce. These are actors who seem to be able to throw off a line, which might have been a throwaway line in almost any other context, and really make the most of it. Tell me just a little bit about your experiences of working with them. Well,
I mean, they're both fine actors and also both very good company on a set. I think that you're right. There's a kind of effortless wit about them both. And a very dry wit. And I mean, particularly Rupert, there's so many scenes that he almost creates little comic kind of punchlines that maybe were or were not in the script in the first place. But it's also true that both of them were attached to the movie when I signed on, and that was a big reason.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of things with Rupert where it seems, my memory of it is that he's in the background of a scene and not even the focus of the main part of the action.
Yes, and he's just
yet he'll find some way to make himself
He was just playing around with the telephone, whatever it might be.
Yeah. Now, in terms, is this a movie that has any sort of message to it at all, or is it?
Well, here's the weird thing: is that when we were making the movie, we were thinking, the stuff the kind of the speeches that Maggie makes when she's in the dock, the general the talk of women's liberation and more specifically women's sexuality. We were thinking, well, we don't want to get too caught up in that because, yes, it's important to the tone of the movie, but it's not the thrust of the movie. And the reason I say that is because, like, we're all pretty much agreed on that. It's right. Like history's moved on, and we've all accepted that these things are a reality. And then cut to a couple of years later, in 2012, and suddenly they're being debated in Congress. I mean, and they're making headlines. So I don't think we anticipated that it would ever be as current as it is. And I mean, I'm not saying that anybody should go to see the movie because it's going to throw huge light on, on current affairs. If anything, I find that depressing.
Well, absolutely. I mean, the idea that this is set, 120 years ago, and yet the idea is a lot of the things discussed in the movie are not 120 years ago. 130 years ago. But so many of the ideas are still sort of almost hot-button topics. I mean, as you say, it's... I don't know. It's interesting because I think that's one of the things that I thought as I was watching the film is the ideas, a lot of the social problems, particularly that Maggie Gyllenhaal's character Charlotte is dealing with. We still face today. In many ways. I mean, there's still, the idea that, people who are impoverished in various ways don't seem to have the kind of social net that they probably should. And there are people like her still who are trying to provide it and not really supported, particularly by government these days. I mean, social programs are the first things that get cut.
I think that's right. That the debate in Victorian England about how you should go about helping the poor, or if you should help the poor, is being echoed right now. I mean, particularly in America, but not only in America. And that's, I mean, not that the conditions that we're facing are the same by any means. But yeah, it's. I mean, I don't think that anybody necessarily had that in mind when we set out to make this film. But right. It doesn't mean you're not right.
Well, it's the idea that sort of you will find in art what you look for. And so if you go to see this movie and you want to see a romantic comedy between nice-looking people and there's a love triangle, that's what you'll see. If you want to look beyond that and see a story with a lot more social meaning, you'll see that. If you want to see a comedy, you'll see that. It's interesting. There's as I said earlier, there's a lot going on in this film.
There is, and what I've found is that I mean, I know one always kind of makes this claim for every movie, but truthfully, I haven't met anybody, and of friends of mine who've been to screenings, very kind of disparate people.
Right.
Everybody finds something that they enjoy in it because it's. It's well made, it's well crafted, but it kind of hits all these different buttons.
Yeah, it's done well at the film festival circuits. I first saw it here in Toronto at the Toronto Film Festival.
Yeah, likewise.
Back in September. Yeah, that's right, because there was an interview that I saw with you where you had said the interview must have been done during Toronto Festival, and where you had said, "Yeah, I had seen the film once before, but with no music and no, all that stuff."
Yes, I saw, and the edit wasn't complete either.
Right.
So I mean, and yes, I mean, it wasn't ready to be seen by an audience in any way.
Now, what do you get out of seeing that?
Well, I saw when I saw it in that state. You mean? Yeah, I thought that the movie worked pretty well. Right. The temp track that Tanya had put on it, although she explained to me you know what I mean by the temp track. Yeah. She explained to me what she was going for was very different, and it gave it a very different tone. So I had some thoughts. The final reel she really hadn't kind of cut into. So it was enough to make me think, this actually might work, but I wasn't at the point of congratulating myself yet.
Right. I find it